life's not worth living unless you're living on the edge. And that's the whole reason I go on those sort of trips is you want to be on the edge. And everything gets tested. Your body gets tested. Your mind gets tested. Your boat, your car, your gear, your fishing gear. Like every little bit is absolutely tested. I mean, if you're on the outer reef for 3 or 4 days, look, by the end of that, every single part of your body is aching, especially if you're throwing top water, because you're in the elements. You're in the heat. The humidity up there is ridiculous, and then you add in a few storms along the way. The first night we had the last trip was we had a tropical storm come through, and we had 50 knot winds, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, lightning bolts going, and I hate lightning. I absolutely hate lightning. And we're holding down this marquee, sort of little marquee that we had for shade, and we're trying to hold that down for 2 hours. Like, you're on the edge there.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now, let's get on to today's show.
Hi, I'm Ben Jones, and also known as GT Buster, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
All right, we are live with Ben Jones, GT Buster. What time is it over there?
6:30 a.m., mate. Nice and early. First coffee for the morning is up and rolling. So.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for doing this. I've been following you on Instagram for a pretty good while, and then had Mick on the podcast, Mick Guthrie, and he introduced us. So I'm really excited to get to talk to you, man.
Yeah, no, I can't wait. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah. So you live in the fishing wonderland. Like when I look at what you do, it's truly incredible. I have talked about the trip that I took to Australia on this podcast a few times, but my trip was in a similar area or in the same area that you are on, but basically it would be like fishing on the Gulf Coast of Florida versus the ocean side of Florida. I was on the I guess, what would you call that, Gulf side of Carpentaria or Cape York?
You're up in Cape York, I think, but you're on the western side, and we usually venture up to the eastern side. So where you guys are at, or where you guys went to, was probably a little bit more. I suppose it's not so much reef.
Yeah,
I don't think, and I haven't been on that side yet, so it's on the bucket list still. So
Man.
I just get so addicted to that East Coast.
Well, I mean, what you do is really incredible, and you've got the Great Barrier Reef over there. I was able to go snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef out of Cairns, and just took a tourist boat out there. It wasn't like we did any kind of crazy thing. I just had half a day, and I was like, man, I got to get in the water somehow. So I just took the first tourist boat I could find. But as soon as I got in the water, I saw one of those giant Napoleon wrasse there. I guess it's like the pet that comes to visit the dive boats or whatever. But I got off I went down the ladder and I turned around and there's this giant thing right behind me. It scared me to death, but it was also one of the coolest experiences ever. And the Great Barrier Reef is it is one of the wonders of the world. I mean, that place is unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It's an unbelievable place. I suppose I've been going up there now since I was probably 16 or 17. So where I live now, I'm in Brisbane. So it's the capital city of Queensland, which is sort of the eastern side of Australia. And to get up to the Great Barrier Reef for us, there is some southern reef, but to get up to the real nice part of the reef, and it comes in a bit close to the coastline, it's probably a good day driving, and then to go to the really remote areas of Cape York, which is right up the top of Australia on the east coast, it sort of takes us a good 2 days of driving. And depending on what the conditions are like and what the roads are like, that can be longer. And, it really is – you really need to sort of take some time to go and do those things. So, we sort of take the time out of our schedule to really sort of plug in and get on the road, pack a whole heap of stuff. And because you're so remote, you've got to pack so much gear.
Yeah, that's what Mick and I were talking about, is just the challenges to that trip. I mean, in that area, when I flew over that area, I mean, it was getting dark. We flew in the late afternoon, and it was getting dark, and there wasn't a light bulb anywhere. I mean, it was black down there. So walk us through like what it looks like as you're driving up that area. I mean, what are the roads like? And is what are the challenges? How do you even have enough fuel to drive for 2 days? Are there places to get fuel, or what does that look like? I mean, those are serious kind of logistical challenges when you're going into such a remote area.
Yeah, well, we've been doing that. Well, the main trip that I've been doing up to Cape York, we've been doing since 2004, and a lot's changed in that time too, Tom. So the first trip we ever did, it took us 3 full days of driving. The last probably 100 kilometres or 60 or 70 miles, that took us a full day because we were getting bogged again. So you'd get, and it's weird. You drive the first sort of day and a half, and you're on the tar, and our highway up the coastline, it's only one lane this way and the other lane that way. So our main highway compared to you guys, where I've been on the highways over there, and let me tell you, that is a death trap itself. Trying to drive on the wrong side of the road, our wrong side of the road, up on the highways. You guys drive crazy on those highways, man.
Well, depending on what city you go to, it's worse. I don't know which one did you have the pleasure of experiencing?
Me and Mick did a trip over there a couple of years ago, and we were driving around Florida, and and we'd hit a couple of the areas at peak hour. And Mick hardly did any driving at all, but I'm a bit of a control freak, so I've got to be at the wheel. And Mick was asleep most of the time, but it was wild on the highway sometimes, like people going from the 5th lane over across to the 1 lane to get the exit, and like, I don't know how they got through.
I tell you, you experienced some of the craziest driving in all of the United States. There's several cities that have really, noticeably crazy drivers. Atlanta in Georgia is one that I experienced really crazy drivers, and everything's going fine. Everything's fine. And you get just to the outskirts of Atlanta, and as soon as you get like into the Atlanta area, which is a sprawling area, all of a sudden everybody's doing this crazy stuff. All of a sudden the average speed picks up. People are shooting in front of you. Miami is another one where the same kind of thing happens. Everything is just fine. Everybody's doing fine. And then you get in Miami and it's whoa. I can't imagine what that would be like coming from somewhere else and you weren't expecting that, because it's
and being on the other side
on the other side of the road. Whenever we go to the Bahamas or I've had to drive on the wrong side or the other side of the road for us too, and it's a challenge, man. You got to constantly, just about the time you feel like you got it, you pull out somewhere and you're going the wrong way. What I mean? Like it's a bad mistake in certain places. But I'm glad you got to experience the best of American drivers.
Yeah. Well, it's you're back to going to Cape York. It's a lot different driving on the roads here. The highway, like I said before, it's only 2 lanes, one way and one the other way. So that in itself can be a bit of a challenge. You've got to make sure that your wits are about you all the time because there's trucks going past. But you sort of get your way up the coastline on the first day, and then in the second day you start to come into, you sort of head inland to go back to the coastline. So you've got to come up the range and then come back to the coastline. And that's when you start to get into the sort of the more country feel. The land's a lot more vast. You're a lot further between towns, and things start to get a bit drier. So you go up the range and there's like rainforest. It's beautiful. You can hear bellbirds and beautiful, sounds. And then you go out into vast country, dry country land. And then you sort of got to go back to the coastline. So we usually pull up at our last town, which is called Laura, and it's a little Indigenous community, mainly Indigenous people. You've got only a few sort of white people in the town, and then it's more Indigenous community around you. And that's the last part of the part of the black strip, I suppose, or the sealed road. And then you go on a dirt road. And back in 2004. It was our first trip up there, and we really didn't know what we were in for. And we hit this. It's really famous for red dirt up there. It's like red. It's almost as red as your shop. I'm not sure if that's red or not.
It's red.
It's almost as red as and it gets into every little crevice of your boat and your car. Like, I mean, you could clean your car for 4 years later, and you'll find red dirt in your car. It's so fine, so you hit this red dirt. And I don't know if you guys get it over there, but you get what we call corrugated road, where it's like got little ridges.
Yeah, right.
So we hit this corrugated road, and this red dirt gets this corrugated road, and it rattles every little bit of your car, of your boat. If you've got sinkers on board, like this is how it is. If you've got sinkers and you've got the hole through the sinker, if you've got a bunch of those in a tackle box and you've gone over corrugated road, it closes, or because all the sinkers rattling against each other, it closes a little hole over. It's crazy. And if you got we have cans of beer.
Yeah,
you can't have cans of beer because they rub together and they split. Yeah. That's how corrugated the road is. So there's like a fine speed you get between like 40 mile an hour until about 70 mile an hour. You can't go too quick because you start bouncing across the road. Or if you're going too slow, you really just it's absolutely crazy, the roads. And then you get into, so it goes into, so you've got that for another 50 mile, and then all of a sudden you sort of go into really slow, hardcore full driving. It's 10 mile an hour, 5 mile an hour, and then you'll hit these little sections of what we call bull dust or sand. It's not sand, but then it's not dust. It's a combination of two, and it's like you step out of the car and it's like powder. You just step out of the car and your foot just goes, and then you get this cloud of dust come up. So we're hitting that, and you have to hit it in these little narrow tracks. You've got to hit it fast, and you've got the trailer on the back, and you're hitting bumps and tree roots and shit's going everywhere. It gets crazy, and you get bogged, and you'll go and winch yourself out of the bog, and then you go and start again, and you only go another 5 yards, and then you're bogged again, so you got to winch it out again.
So in those bogs, is that a wet area? Because you said that you were going through the dry area. So are there like mud holes up there?
No, it's all mainly dry. We always go up in the dry season. You can't. They almost shut it all off in the wet season because it's I suppose it's like Florida conditions where you just get these big build-up, hot, humid, ridiculous, and then all of a sudden it's just pouring rain, and then you'll get days of rain and everything just floods. So you can't really get up there in the wet season unless you're going to get on go by a boat, or if you're if you're going in by a helicopter or something like that. But you can't get up there and wet, so you've got to go in the dry. And but even then, if there's been a long wet, you'll still get some mud holes and those sort of things. But most of those boggy sections I was talking about, it's more this dusty, white, sandy stuff that you just can't get through. It's just like quicksand. If you don't hit it hard enough, you're going down.
Oh, wow. And so you travel through that for a good ways.
Yeah.
On that first trip, did you question whether you were going to make it to put the boat in? I mean, it sounds like that's a pretty big adventure in its own self, just making it up there.
It's funny you say that, because I really was. We got to the last bit and we didn't know where we were, so we didn't realise how far we'd got, because we didn't have GPSs then or anything like that. So, and you got no service, so you're 8 hours of driving away from any radio coverage. You don't even get radio on your car. You get nothing, no service on your phone. It's the best, really. I just love that. Like, you're just off the grid, totally off the grid. But we got to the last section where we got bogged and everything was up to the axle, so you sort of couldn't get through. And I was thinking, this is it. We're stuck here. We're done. We're not going any further. And then we were lucky we had a friend with us, and he wasn't carrying anything off the back, so he'd put the winch onto the front of us and pulled us through the last bit. And that was it. We finally got through and went, we're here. We've done it. We've finally done it. And it was a massive celebration to actually get through and hit the beach. But we usually stay at a certain location for a 2-week period. We just unload the boat, set up camp under these big trees. They're big wongai trees, they're called. They're sort of like a savanna sort of like tree that has a lot of spread, and you've got a lot of shade to get out of the elements. And then we fish for 2 weeks, just go crazy for 2 weeks.
And you have enough fuel? Like, how do you manage your fuel consumption?
Yeah, well, so to go to that location, you don't have to go too far on the boat, but then you'll do some big trips out for a few days of the trip. But we take all the fuel in, so it's going to be hard for me to convert it from litres to gallons.
It's okay.
But we take in with us usually about sort of 400 litres of fuel, and we're just carrying them all in jerry cans. Yeah. So they all just sit up in the boat, and all the camp gears in between the car and the boat. And that's half the battle as well. You're carrying so much weight between sort of fuel and camping gear and food, and we take in a generator so we can run our fridges and those sort of things. So you got to take your beer, of course, at the end of the day. So you're taking all this weight, and that's where the damage can be done, because you're carrying so much weight. Usually something goes wrong on the trailer, like you'll snap a spring, or you'll bend an axle, or there's all sorts of drama.
So do you take all that stuff with you now?
Yeah, we always take spares. So a couple of times we've snapped springs before and we've had two, so we take a spare spring, but then we've snapped two. So basically you pull up on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, someone stays with the boat and car for a day and a half, and they've got all the fuel and water and beer, and you unhitch the trailer, and then you got to go all the way back to town. So you drive another 8 hours back to town, pick up a spring, come back in, jack up the trailer, take everything. It's a full-on trip. So it's something.
So how have things changed as you plan for this? And you go up there now, or if you were to plan one now, what would you change? Would you have two trucks with boats, and then another vehicle and extra springs, and like what lessons have you learned on such a remote area that you would be prepared for now?
Yeah, it's just taking extra gear, and every year you learn something new, and we've been going for so long now. You sort of there's still lessons to be learned every time. There's something that'll break that you didn't even think of. I didn't even think of bringing a spare one of those. So it's bad luck. You just got to sort of roll with the punches and sort of learn as you go along. So the roads have got a lot better since we've been going up, and it's mixed emotions about that, because now what's occurred is that because they've made the roads a bit easier to get in, it's meant that more people will access it. Plus, we've got social media, I suppose, and idiots like myself love posting and entertaining people. So a lot of people will follow that. So it does get a lot busier now, Tom, up there, which is fine. It's mixed emotions. You want to be up there by yourself and get away from everyone, but also you want to see other people enjoy it and do the stuff that you've done before and got so much love out of it. So it's made it easier for people to access, and I suppose the other side, flip side of it is that means that you're not going to get that by yourself feeling a lot. But that, I suppose, causes you to then rethink where you go, which has happened to me over the last probably 5 years. We've sort of stopped going as much to the same location, and now I'm sort of venturing to new locations up in Cape York, and doing solo adventures myself and sort of challenge. I just love the challenge, I suppose.
Wow, man!
Challenge myself.
I mean, a solo adventure up there. I mean, what happens? I mean, if something goes wrong, you seem like that's. I don't know who would even come to help. Is there? And how would you even get help? Do you have a satellite phone or what do you do?
Yeah. This year it's the first time we've done it. We carried what we call a Zolio. I think Mick might have mentioned it.
Yeah.
We carried this thing called a Zolio, and it connects into your iPhone, and it almost turns your iPhone into a satellite phone.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's a really handy little gadget. It doesn't allow you to make calls, but you can make SOS. You can press SOS
Sure.
if you're in danger. Or you can send text messages to people that have the same app. So usually you set up with your family members or friends.
Right.
And you can send sort of text messages and get weather updates and those sort of things. So that's pretty handy. But I didn't have that device a couple of years ago, and I did take a satellite phone with me and did a solo adventure, but didn't need it. I'd got a bit of a weather update, but went out to a little island for a 5-day adventure up in Cape York and sat on a little island for 5 days by myself. And, it was amazing.
That's awesome, man. And so when you go up to something like that on that one that you did by yourself, is that an area that you had been before, or was that a new place?
It was, but I'd done one trip up there before with a mate. Mm-hmm. And so I knew what it was all about, but I'd only been there the once, and even just going there again, and then I've been there again, you just seem to learn so much more each time you go.
Yeah.
It's it's really off the grid. There's some communities around there that you've got to be careful with your vehicle. So firstly, you get to the location where you launch the boat, and then you've got to leave your car and trailer somewhere. So there's we get mud crabs over here. I don't know what you guys have over there differently, but in the mangroves area, there's mud crabs, and there's a pro crabber, the person who makes a livelihood of catching crabs, and they live in the mangroves in these little shanties. So you've got to not bribe him, but take a case of beer and a loaf of bread, and basically say, hey, look after my car for the next 5 days, and I'm going to give you this case of beer. So you leave it with him, and then you venture offshore, and you're offshore sort of 40 or 50 miles offshore out to a little island, and you've got to take everything with you in the boat for those 5 days.
And you're just hoping nobody...
You're just on a little remote island, away from everyone. I mean, you're 12 hours away from anyone, and it's just... And you're on the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
One of the best places, I think, probably the best place in the world to fish.
That's unbelievable. And so is a loaf of bread and a case of beer enough?
Yeah, because I don't see that very often.
I bet not.
I can't explain to you how you think of like a little African village where you've got these little shanties, and you place that in the middle of the mangroves with sandflies and midges and crocodiles. It's all open. He just sits there spraying himself with, I don't know, Agent Orange, basically, just spraying himself all day. It is the roughest thing you could ever imagine that he's sleeping into. Yeah, so they don't see many delights, and they see a case of beer, and it's like,
I bet they'd like to sit inside that car and get away from the flies, or whatever's biting them. You know, like that would be the thing. That man, that just sounds like the most awesome adventure. And then when you get out there, I mean, the Great Barrier Reef, the water is crystal clear. And how many species of fish do you, on a trip like you're describing there, well, how many species of fish do you think would be available to you?
Well, I think, one of those trips we were up there for 2 weeks. One of the first trips we did, I think we counted up to sort of 90 different species of fish we caught over the 2 weeks.
90.
So it just, something like that. It was like 80 or 90 different species of fish. Anything from little ones, we were counting everything, but I mean, just like absolutely different species of fish. It's just, so you can go from reef fishing the bottom and catching, your snappers or we call them nanagai here. And then you can go and just throw, I just love the top water stuff. It's top water to me. Like I get in like a tunnel vision where I just can't get away from it, especially the reef flat stuff where it's only sort of a lot, it's a lot shallower. So you sort of look at 10 foot deep and you see all the bommies, you're side casting at fish, and you're seeing your Napoleon wrasse and all your different sweet lips and coral trout.
Now that coral trout looks like it kind of resembles one of our grouper, right? And they're super aggressive and they crash stuff on the surface. I was looking through your Instagram. It looked like you had that was one that you particularly liked. And man, just incredibly beautiful fish and I guess super aggressive.
Yeah. It's a bit of a prize fish over here. A lot of the bottom fishers or even the top water fishers love catching them because they're great to eat. I'm sure it's the same with the grouper over there. But the one thing about them is they'll crush top water. They'll absolutely crush top water.
And how deep are they coming out of? Like when you're finding a good spot for those, is it 10 feet, 20 feet? What do you think?
You can get them from anything from 6 foot of water, even 3 foot of water with bommies different, and they're very hard to in that sort of water, especially if you get a good one. You basically hand on the spool, lean them back, and you P6 and 150 pound leader, and you are not giving them an ounce, not an ounce. You are trying to put the brakes on because the second you give them a little bit, they're straight under the coral, and it's not just under the coral. They seem to find it's like they've got their own little caves. They'll just keep going. If you give them any line, they'll just keep going and going and going, and then it's all over. So it's anything from sort of 3 foot of water right through to what would that convert to? So I've got my first 2 really big coral trout, which I call dino trout because they're just dinosaurs of the ocean. They come out of 180 feet to hit top water.
What?
People go, what? these are bottom-dwelling fish. They're like your grouper. They'll be sitting on the bottom. They're coming out of 180 feet. I was casting, so we'd come up to school a yellowfin, and I had top water on, cast at these yellowfin, and I was sort of going pop, pop, and then boom, got crunched. And I went, oh yeah, good one. And then it wasn't fight. Yellowfin go crazy. The speed's crazy. Whereas the coral trout it'll just be more down, hard, grunt. This thing was fighting weird. I was thinking, I must have it hooked sideways, and then I was like, this is not a yellowfin. And then all of a sudden, this big dino trout comes up. I'm like, boys, what do I do? Help, give me something, help.
That seems like that would be an advantage, though. Like if you could find them to where they would respond to the lure in deeper water, you would have as opposed to 3 feet of water. That sounds like an almost impossibility to get one to, But if they give you a little bit of leeway with maybe 50, 80, 100 feet of water, is going to make it a lot more possible to land them, I would think.
Yeah, 100% right. So yeah, you get them out of that water. It's a lot easier to land, and they are just like that. That direct, I suppose, that first up hook up. That's when the most power from those fish comes. So once you're sort of bringing them back, it's not as as crazy as getting them out of sort of 3 foot of water or 6 feet or 10 feet of water. So it's a different fight, but it's still crazy to see. You're sort of looking down expecting a yellowfin, and you see this thing come up and this big sort of reddy browny log come up. You're like, what the hell have I hooked out of 180 feet of water? It's just crazy that they'll be looking up, or whether they're already up there with the school of yellowfin, or whether they're looking up and just going, oh, there's a wounded bait fish, and they come up and crunch the lure from there. So.
Well, one of the techniques that we use all over Florida is, we'll cast net the pilchards and we'll take them out into deep water. You may have tuna schools or amberjack schools or all different kinds of schools of fish that are deep, maybe 200 feet deep. You start throwing the pilchards out there and you're live chumming, and they come up and they start busting on the surface. Then you can throw lures or flies or live baits on, and you catch them right on the surface like that. But it takes, quite a few pilchards to really get their attention and pull them up. But I've always been amazed at how far away those fish can see just, 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 pilchards, and they'll come all the way up for those. If those dino trout are seeing your lure, it also speaks to the clarity of the water. I would think that they could see it from 100 feet away, that you would have that kind of visibility there, or even more. What do you think the visibility on the Great Barrier Reef under good conditions? What do you think that might be?
Oh, sometimes it's forever. Like I don't know what it's like. It's going to be 200 feet, 300 feet. Like you just see some days out there, the water, when you look at it, especially on the outer reef. Like the outer reef is, you got your inner reef and those sort of areas, and that gets nice and clear, and you might get sort of 90 feet on a good day. But you step out over the outer reef, and that's a different story. The inner reef, you can go from being in 30 feet to 90 feet to 120 feet sort of thing. But then you go to the outer reef, and it goes from, 3 feet of water down into, all of a sudden, it's a straight drop down into 30 feet of water, which isn't deep. But then all of a sudden, within half a mile, you're all of a sudden in 3,000 feet of water.
Wow.
And the water is like, it's not blue anymore. It's like a purple color. It's just crazy water. And then you got dogtooth tuna, massive black marlin, yellowfin tuna, big-eyed tuna, dolphin fish, wahoo, and then you can be casting the flats all of a sudden within half a mile for coral trout, Napoleon wrasse. It's just, the place is insane, and you haven't got a lifetime to fish it, because there's just not enough time in your life.
Man, that sounds like a fisherman's dream. I mean, that just sounds like the greatest place you could ever go. I think it probably is. Do you ever get out there and, like Mick was explaining, the boats that you guys fish? You're fishing basically, 17-foot boats. Is that right? I think I see one, out your window there with a trolling motor, and is that your boat right there?
Yeah, that's my rig outside.
Yeah,
there. So,
it basically looks like something between a bay boat and a skiff. Not a high-sided boat. And so when you get out there and you're going to that outer reef, you ever hook something that you think, man, I think I shouldn't have done this. Like you catch a massive black marlin out there, and that's like old man in the sea. Like that's just awesome. And to combine that, you're just out on the edge of the earth. If anything goes wrong, I don't know who's going to go help you. And now you hook onto some kind of fish that is like probably bigger than your boat. I mean, that could happen, right? Like that's real life. That's like on the edge. That's extreme fishing. That is so cool. Like, but even when you're explaining it, I'm like, damn, man. Like I have felt that before, where you hook something and you're like, I don't know if I should have done this. You're by yourself. You've hooked something and you're like, man, things could go wrong here. And I don't know. Maybe I made a mistake by hooking this big shark or, you know, like something huge.
We haven't had it happen yet. We've had big black marlin come up yet, but it's only a matter of time, and that's always in the back of my mind. I think we hooked a massive black marlin on top water where we're throwing for dogtooth tuna or whatever. What's going to happen? How are we going to land this? By God, we're not cutting this thing off. like you hook a black marlin and a big one like a 500 pounder or something like that, and you're in a 17-footer. There's no way knowing you should be landing that fish, but there's no way knowing you're cutting that fish off. Or you're going to do everything to get to the side of the boat. So we're just going to have to make do with what we have at the time. But we get a lot of sharks. You get a lot of big tiger sharks come up the side of the boat. We've had it before where these sharks, and Tom, I can't explain to you, and I know there'd probably be a problem off the Florida coast as well, but the amount of sharks now these days, it's just phenomenal. They are getting what I would call worse. You can hardly land a fish, especially on that outer reef. We get them they get in a feeding frenzy where they're eating, the fish you're catching, and then all of a sudden they got nothing more to eat, so they start hitting the prop. If you've got a stainless steel prop, or it's just slowly turning in the water and getting the flash off the sun, they'll come in and nail the prop. They'll just go mad, like they're just in a sensory where they just won't stop. So you're in a small boat and you've got that sort of stuff happening, but you really do know you're alive. But I suppose that's what I go there for.
Yeah.
Even when you get bad storms, you get a bad tropical storm coming, or you end up in a spot where, I think Mick told the story where we were stuck on a beacon for a good 5 or 6 hours in the middle of nowhere, and the boys were looking at me as if to say, turn the EPIRB on, which is the signaling device to save us. And it wasn't until they looked at me with deathly eyes, like I thought they were going to kill us, or I thought they were going to kill me. I thought the boys were going to kill me, and they actually just sort of looked at me and go, set the effing EPIRB off now. And it took me to that last minute to sort of go, righto, we're going to set it off now. But that's what I go there for. Even though in the time you're sort of thinking about it, you're in a life or death situation sometimes, you're thinking, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah.
This is actually what I come here for, to get that actual thrill that, I don't know, you're on the edge. Like you said, you're on the edge of the earth.
You're on the edge, man. And you were on the edge when you put the boat in the water. Like, and now you're out so far away, and then you're dealing with, the wildlife too, like the sharks. So is it mostly tiger sharks, or do you have a lot of other sharks when they're problem sharks?
There's every single shark. Probably the only shark you won't get there is the great white up that far north. The water's too warm for the great white. Where we are off the coastline here in Brisbane, there's definitely great whites, but up there is every other shark. So you've got your tiger sharks, big hammerhead, massive tiger sharks, massive hammerheads. The one that's probably the most dangerous is the oceanic white tip, I think, from what I hear from the divers. Like, they're like really aggressive and they get a bit larger. Your small black tip reef sharks, they're all in the mingle, but mostly your bull sharks as well. On the inner reefs, you get a lot of big bull sharks, and they're super aggressive. They'll hit your boat. They'll nail anything in the water.
Wow. That's awesome.
And so you've got crocodiles.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Right. There are so many things in Australia that can hurt you. I mean, even coming from Florida, where, we got all those same kind of sharks, and they can be very aggressive and stuff like that. But you still wade and stuff like that. But when I went to Australia, I said, do we wade? And the dude that booked the trip for me, he was like, you don't go very far from the boat. Like, there's too many things in the water that too many bitey things in the water is what he told me. And I was like, understood, copy. Okay. I won't go very far away. You don't need to tell me twice. But the crocodiles, all of us watched Steve Irwin, handle the crocodiles down there, and they are the biggest things I've ever seen in my life. I'm interested in the...
And you'll see this pig like a wild pig right next to you. Because that's how they don't have any interaction with humans. And then all of a sudden, you sort of wake up and you sort of get a jolt, and they get scared because they see it, and then off they run. you get dingoes coming in your camp looking for scraps, and you sort of just got to shoo them off. But the first year we were up there, there was our camp, and then about 2 miles down the beach was the other camp. And that is it, within 30 miles of beach in the middle of nowhere in Cape York. No one else. Our camp, their camp. And on the last day that we were there, we woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were packing up, getting ready to go in the dark. And we had this spotlight from right down the beach from their camp shining at us, and it kept flashing. And they were doing a lot of hunting, like pig hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, oh, geez, they're up. That's a bit weird. They're up early. It must be pig hunting or something. We thought it was just the light flashing on us all the time. We didn't think much of it. Little do we know, a crocodile had come up the beach, had come to the front of their tent and gone in, grabbed a bloke out of the tent, pulled him out of the tent, started dragging him down the beach while he's trying to beat it off. The rest of the family run out. And while he's trying to beat this croc off, getting attacked by a croc, one of the guys luckily had a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Highly illegal. Over there, I don't think it'll be illegal.
No.
But in Australia, it's highly illegal to carry that sort of weapon. And it was, I don't know whether it was collector's item or what, he had it, but it was lucky he had it. He put his knee over its head and put 4 shots into it and killed it on the spot. So when we left, we went and stopped in to say goodbye, and here's this bloke being attacked by a crocodile laying on the ground, 4.2 metre or what's that, like a 20-foot crocodile sitting right in front of him, dead as a doornail. And what had happened is also when he was getting dragged out of the tent, a grandmother of the family that was there, she jumped out. She was the first one to see the crocodile attack happening, and she jumped on his head. As she jumped on his head, it's flung around, hit her arm, nearly cut her arm off, which was dangling by a bit of skin, hit her nose, broke her nose, and I mean, it was dangling by a bit of skin. So they've had to rush her out. And while they're rushing her out, old mate was just laying there. He was still conscious. Everything was fine. He had a broken leg, broken arm, had to leave him, rush her out because she was bleeding profusely from her arm. And she didn't rush out. And 12 hours worth of driving, and she had to get to hospital and save her arm.
And they couldn't take him too?
Sorry?
They couldn't take him too? Like
No, because she was bleeding to death.
Yeah,
basically, they had a tourniquet on her arm, and they had to get her out. He was basically had puncture wounds on him, but he was bleeding, but wasn't bleeding profusely, and it was enough for him to stay where he was with some of the rest of camp. And so we set off an EPIRB when we got down there in the morning. We set off an EPIRB, and they had a chopper ride come in. And they had a first aid guy with them. The first aid guy would give him some first aid. We had a first aid kit which helped, and put his leg into a sling. His leg into a splint, and his arm into a sling, and patched him up as best as possible. We lifted him up, put him in the chopper, and then took him away. But I've got the full story on my YouTube channel. But it's a crazy thing that this crocodile actually come up the beach, come to the front of the tent, and it was pitch black dark. They had the tent, and then they had like the fly awning, still open.
Yeah,
still closed. So the flaps were open, so you could see outside. And there was a moon that morning, and his wife said she heard a rustle at the front of the tent, thought it was a dingo or a pig or, something that they've had all week. And then she sort of woke up and could see this silhouette of the crocodile at the front of the tent. She said, Jason, there's a croc. He reckons he woke up. He just woke up. As soon as he sat like that, sat up, the croc's just gone woof, straight through the tent, grabbed him.
Oh, my gosh.
Crazy thing. That was our first year of going up there.
Wow. That's the craziest story I've ever heard. Oh, my God. I mean.
So if any of listeners are wanting to search it and they don't believe the story, because it is hard to believe, but look up Alicia Sorahan, Crocodile Cape York, or something like that. Just type in Alicia Sorahan, and I've got the story of it in my YouTube, which shows the actual dead crocodile. It shows the bloke that's wounded and all the first aid we were giving him, and I tell the story, in a more elaborate. But it's something that it's your worst nightmare. Nightmare.
That is a crocodile. I mean, in the United States, I guess the closest thing that we would have would be a grizzly bear, or maybe a mountain lion could take somebody. We do have crocodiles, but they're much smaller than yours, and apparently not as, I don't know. I mean, I guess that people camp in the Everglades, and they probably encounter crocodiles. You don't hear about them like you hear about the Australian crocodiles. So maybe they're not as aggressive. I don't know. Maybe I don't have any negative altercations with crocodiles. We see them. They're like sunning on like a little beach area as we're riding by. That's it. And I've paddleboarded in areas where they are and didn't really even feel, really all. I mean, it was unnerving for sure.
Yep.
But apparently, like if you did that same thing in Australia, that would be absolute insanity to do that. So I don't think that ours are, and I could be way wrong. We'll have 50 emails telling me stories about American crocodiles that have gone after people, but I don't think ours are as aggressive as yours. But that is the worst nightmare ever. A crocodile taking. Whew, right at night too. That's crazy. One of the other things that you were talking about on your just before I get to that, but you were talking about how that you've seen an increase in the sharks since you have been going up to that area. Do you see it? Is that consistent with other places you fish closer to home, or do you see the increase? And do you hear about the increase of sharks all over Australia, or what's your opinion on that?
Mate, I definitely think so, mate. I think it's definitely here at home, here even in Brisbane, where once upon a time you'd barely see a shark. You barely see a shark. Now, when I go out there, and I suppose it's been probably for the last 10 years, I've really noticed an increase where. There won't be a time I go out offshore here and not see a shark, and so much so now is that I think the increase has just exploded. Where I just seen a post of a guy that makes soft plastics over here, and he's quite successful with soft plastic, but he's now in the river system and having a problem not only with losing fish to sharks in the river systems or in the mangrove systems, but he's also now hooking a lot of sharks on his soft plastics. So they're even hitting like your soft plastic lures in your inshore areas, which offshore we lose a lot of our lures to sharks, a lot of our top water lures and those sort of things now to sharks. And they are just, it is pretty much, there's not too many times offshore now. There's like every second fish is getting chased by a shark. If you're trying to catch mackerel or GTs or any of your top water species, the sharks are onto it.
Now, did anything change with commercial fishing regulations on sharks, or did they become protected in certain areas, or do you notice?
I think it's frowned upon now. I think even just with, I don't know whether commercial things have changed for shark fishing, but basically there's no shark fishing allowed as far as I know. I could be wrong, but it's just. But it's just frowned upon to take a shark or to kill a shark. Or like that.
I mean, it became that way here too, and even in the United States, people. Let's just say that the international waters are not very far off, and apparently there used to be more shark fishing than is happening now. So they've become somewhat protected, and our shark population has completely exploded. And I don't know that it's because of the commercial fishing regulations or not, or for whatever reason, we have more sharks in the state of Florida, the Florida Keys, up both coasts. I mean, it is crazy. Going over to the Bahamas, you'll be catching yellowfin tuna, and you might get one. and then you got to move. You might get one, and that is somebody that is like yourself or me or somebody that has been there. They know, like, this is going to be an athletic event. You're going to hook a fish, and you better be on that fish. No messing around. You give it everything you've got. You fish the heaviest tackle you can possibly do it, and you get that thing in like it's like your life depends on it. And you might get one, maybe you get two, but once one gets attacked, it's over. You're not catching another one. So you got to move. And even when you move, they seem to move with you. And maybe you can hook a fish and they're going, maybe you can get one. But you hear so much about, the sharks are endangered and they are, I do believe that it could be possible that in certain parts of the world, they're fishing for sharks so much that the worldwide population of sharks maybe could be going down, but in certain areas like your area, my area, the population is more than I've ever seen before. And I think most of the guides that come on here and talk, they have the same experience. I don't talk to anyone who is like, man, I haven't seen a shark in months. It's not like that. It is the other way. And it's every species, man, just tons of sharks. And I don't have anything against sharks. I like looking at sharks. I like them being around, but I don't, they make it really, really hard to catch a fish. And it's interesting to hear, the Americans will be interested to hear that's your experience in Australia. Cause we don't have our finger on the pulse on, that you would have a lot of sharks there. I would imagine you would have a lot of sharks. You're talking about the Great Barrier Reef. It's probably one of the greatest fishing, or fish ecosystems in, probably the best. I think you could say that. So of course there's going to be great, amounts of sharks there, but to hear you say that you've seen it on the increase is very interesting to me.
100% on the increase, and so much so, again, I keep referring back to Cape York and the sort of spot back in 2004, especially on the inshore reefs, we hardly lost a fish to a shark on the inshore reefs. Now you go and fish those same reefs, and you can barely catch a fish. Like we were saying, you can barely catch a fish. It is, I mean, catch a fish. You might land the first one, like we said, and then all of a sudden it's just every one of them get cleaned up by a shark. And it's so much so that you get sick of it. You just, no, we can't keep doing damage to the actual fish population. You
got to move.
Because of the sharks.
You got to move.
You got to move. And like you said as well, is that you go and move, but you might move a mile or 2 miles, which you think's plenty, but it only gives you breathing room for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And then it's shark.
I know. And you would think that, we think, well, because of all the pressure that we have in Florida and going over to the Bahamas and fishing these areas where a lot of people fish there, that the sharks become conditioned to the boat. They hear these boats, they hear the outboards. They're like, okay, well, I got a meal there last time, so I hear those outboards. I'm going to that sound, and that sound moves over there. I'm going to follow that sound. But what's different is that in the areas that you're talking about fishing, virtually no one goes there. I mean, by our standards, no one's there. You're saying that it's hard to get that completely alone feeling. Maybe you see a boat in 2 days. I don't know, 10 boats. What would it be? What would it look like if you thought it was super crowded where we're talking about going?
Yeah, you probably see 2 boats in a day or something like that.
I mean, that's like, I mean, that is way out there, An
interesting theory on that. I think and we talk about evolution of different species, and I think now the evolution of the shark is, and I don't know whether it passes through their DNA. It could be and I'm no scientist. I'm far from a scientist, but I'm not sure if it's possible for that. For sharks to know that a boat or the sound of a boat, or the motor, for that to actually pass down through their DNA, so it just becomes part of their DNA where they know that this could be a weird theory, but I think that's what's happening now, is that the sharks are actually, it's passing through their DNA to know that boats are a source of food. That's just part of their makeup, from when they're born from the get-go. So, you get, like you said, we go into these places, like remote places where you barely see a boat. I barely see a boat, but these sharks are like, you turn up to the outer reef and as soon as you step out over that ledge and it starts to drop away a bit, you look under the boat. It's not even, pull the fish in, okay, the sharks are around you. You turn up, you look under the boat and you got 2 sharks circling you straight away. I mean, like immediately as soon as you pull up. So to me, that's saying to me, the sharks know that the boat is a source of food, and they even know that from not even being around boats. It's something that's actually in their system now. That's actually, they know that a boat is a source of food.
Well, I've heard crazier theories, and I'm no scientist either, but I have listened to some other podcasts and some other theories about that happening with other animals. And I think it was, I think I heard it. There was this really super fascinating podcast. It was one of Joe Rogan's early ones. And he had this guy on there and he was talking about morphic dissonance, I think is what he called it. And he was talking about these crows or these blackbirds of some sort. And they learned how to, they would deliver the milk. And there was a story about the milkman used to put the milk on the doorstep. They'd bring your milk to you. And there was like a thin layer of whatever, not like a metal cap or whatever, but just a thin layer of something would cover the milk. And these birds could go over and they could get in there and they would suck out the cream off the top. And they would just get the cream and they would go around. But then they found out that birds in other areas away from this started doing the same thing. So kind of what you're talking about with the sharks, but there's documented things of this happening. So it was too far for these birds. They weren't like migratory birds and they weren't like learning this behavior here and going over there, but somehow or another, it just happened. And I think, we haven't even talked about cast, but you can see things like this happen with certainly with bass fishing of a lure will say it's a chatterbait or something that has one of your lures, right? And the first time you throw it in, it's just, they can't stay away from it. They love that lure. You're catching bigger, more bass. And let's just say you fish it in this one body of water and then it stops working in that body of water, but it takes a long time. I don't know. It just stops working everywhere, right? Like the bodies of water don't have to be connected. And it's like, I don't know. It could be that anglers have less confidence in it because we used to fish this lure and it worked really well. And then it stopped working. But now it seems to have stopped working over here in this other unassociated lake that should have nothing to do with pressure or anything else. And you can see how these lures, they get really popular and then they fall off. But they fall off everywhere. And it's like, is there... I don't know. Like, is there some sort of weird communication that I don't know? And the DNA is like not even like what you're talking about. These sharks, like, there's a possibility that they could move into these different areas and they could have had this experience, or they could have had offspring that go to these different areas. But like what you're talking about in these impoundments and these lakes, they're completely separate. They're like different universes living in space, and there's no travel back and forth between the two, but somehow the experience is similar, that this lure just all of a sudden stopped working in both places. I don't know. What is that? It's great for lure manufacturers because you just make new lures, but I don't know. It's a strange thing, but I maybe we'll find that, we'll find that Joe Rogan podcast and people can listen to it if they want. It was one of the really early ones. And I think this guy's name was, I'll think of it. But I mean, I'm talking like he's put out thousands of podcasts now. And I bet you this was like one of the first 500 podcasts that he did. And it was Rupert. Oh, gosh, I'll think of it because it was really one of the best ones I ever listened to. And he talked about dogs and how dogs can, like, as you're coming home and your dog gets up and stands by the door way earlier than he could have heard your car or anything like that. And they had some sort of some sort of an extra sense that we don't understand, can't understand. We don't know what it is, but I've seen that. I've seen that happen where the dog gets up and starts looking out the window 3 or 4 or 5 minutes before a car comes into the driveway. And it does it every single time. My dog used to do this. But this person, he had this Rupert Sheldrake. That's the episode of Joe Rogan. And he called this, what we're talking about, morphic dissonance. And I believe that's what it's been a long time since I listened to that episode. But morphic resonance. The theory of morphic resonance. Okay, so now you know what you're going to do for the rest of the day, right? You can listen to a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast and tell me if I'm onto something here. But I don't know. It sounds very familiar. I've heard crazier theories than what you're talking about, but all I know is what you know is that when you get to these certain areas, the sharks are there, and they seem to be following the boat. How do they know how to do that? I don't know.
100%. They're definitely doing it.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, you are living an awesome life down there, and I gotta get down there and fish with you and Mick. That would be just a dream come true. That would be amazing. You guys get after it. I can see on your Instagram, you guys are a bunch of animals down there, man. That's the kind of people I want to fish with. You go after it, and this adventure, this whole adventure going up there, it sounds. I don't know. I'll just stay in the car because I don't know much about crocodiles and what to avoid and all the other snakes and spiders and other things that you have down there. I'm afraid I'll take a wrong step, but I would love to do that. That just sounds like the greatest trip ever.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. You do have to do it. Whenever I go on those trips, I always think, in the back of my mind, I always think, life's not worth living unless you're living on the edge. And that's the whole reason I go on those sort of trips is you want to be on the edge, and everything gets tested. Your body gets tested, your mind gets tested, your boat, your car, your gear, your fishing gear, like every little bit gets absolutely tested. I mean, if you're on the outer reef for 3 or 4 days, like by the end of that, every single part of your body is aching, especially if you're throwing top water, because you're in the elements. You're in the heat. The humidity up there is ridiculous, and then you add in a few storms along the way. The first night we had the last trip was we had a tropical storm come through, and we had 50-knot winds, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, lightning bolts going, and I hate lightning. I absolutely hate lightning. And we're holding down this marquee, sort of little marquee that we had for shade, and we're trying to hold that down for 2 hours. Like, you're on the edge there.
You're on the edge. What would happen if that would be the worst time for a crocodile to come visit you during that? Like, you think, oh, I can't get any worse than this, and now there's a 20-foot crocodile there to come to visit. That's incredible.
That's what it felt like at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were thinking that, like, it can't get any worse to a trip to start the morning off with. It was a tropical storm in the dark, holding down tents, and it's just. But yeah, you wake up in the morning, you dust yourself off, you're like a crumb sausage. You got sand from head to toe, and you just think to yourself, what just happened? And then you think, well, this is what I come here for. This is what I actually come here for. This experience, You actually push yourself to the limit.
Man, I tell you what, you would have to be extra super careful of losing your boat. Like if 50-knot winds, I mean, extra anchors, extra lines, extra everything every night. Because after having that experience one time, if you had lost your boat, if a boat had gone away, I mean, that could be it, right? Like, what you're just going to live out there on that little sand island for not very long.
That's what I mean, Tom. You live on the edge, mate. That's life's not worth living unless you live on the edge. It's and all that sort of stuff is possible. You could get attacked by a crocodile. You could get attacked by a shark. You could get stung by a box jellyfish. But hey, you're not going to get that if you're going to sit on the lounge at home watching on TV. So you may as well get out there and do it.
I love it, man. I love it. That's a great way to end this one. And it won't be the last one. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'd love to have you on again. And so tell us about how people can follow you. And we didn't even really talk about Cast, but you're a co-owner in Cast, and we did talk about it pretty extensively with Mick. So tell people how they could follow you and how they can learn more about what you do at Cast, and where can we find you?
So if you're on Instagram, if you just search GT Buster on Instagram, you'll find me on there. So just GT is in Giant Valley Buster. You can find me there, or castmag.co, which is our Australian handle, or castfishing.co, which is our American handle. We have got our business over there, which is a small startup, which we're sort of kicking a few goals, but yeah, we're just working hard in the background there. If you want to go and have a look at any of my videos, I've put a lot of videos. I think I've got 100 plus videos on YouTube. That's been a bit of a slow slog, but I love doing it. I love putting all my trips up there. So if you want to see one of those trips in its full, you can see that on my YouTube channel. Just search GT Buster on there. There is the crocodile attack story on there. So you don't actually see the attack on that YouTube video, but you do get the full kit and caboodle. It is a half an hour video explaining exactly what happened and how it happened. So, and you do get to see the dead crocodile, and you do get to see the bloke that got attacked. It's some crazy footage. So
we'll put that in the notes, and people can click that link and go watch that. But anyway, awesome talking with you, man. Awesome talking with you. Thanks for doing it, and definitely go follow Ben for some really good content. His GT Buster is one of my favorite Instagrams, and it will be one of your favorites too. He catches some crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff in Australia. But anyway, thanks so much, Ben. Nice to talk with you, and we'll have you on again.
Thanks very much, Tom. Really appreciate it, Mark. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.